Seeing some folks already with raised hands. So thank you all for attending this webinar on the Financial Aid Application Completion Initiative. My name is Manuel Talavera. I go by Manny. I'm a training and development specialist at ISAC. I want to go over some housekeeping items before I dig into the content. So we use a platform called WebEx, and if you're having trouble hearing me, you can hover your mouse cursor over the mute button. You'll see audio options. You can have WebEx call you on your phone, or you can sort of dial in, and it's not going to impact sort of your place in the webinar. Also, if you hover your mouse over the top screen, if you're using the desktop app, you have the ability to zoom in and zoom out, and it's not going to impact anyone else's view. We also post our webinar recordings on our website at isac.org/PD. You can find a slot where we have our on-demand webinars. We also ask that if you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature. I'm being joined by some of my colleagues, Nicole and Crystal, who are available to help answer any questions that you may have. And also, we are offering continuing education and professional development hours. We'll have some more information on them in the chat towards the end of this presentation, so stay tuned for that. So hi everyone, so for those who aren't familiar with ISAC, we're the Illinois Student Assistance Commission. I like to think about us as the largest one-stop resource for financial aid information. Our mission is to provide Illinois students with information and assistance to help make education affordable and accessible. And we also administer various grants and scholarships like the Monetary Award Program, the MAP grant, to students across the state of Illinois. In our Division of College Access and Services, we provide, in particular our department, we provide professional development offerings on a wide list of topics such as navigating the financial aid process, different resources that we offer at ISAC, as well as understanding state loan, student loan repayment and forgiveness programs, to just name a few topics. So here are a few things that we're going to talk about. We're going to get into the Illinois Financial Aid Application Graduation Requirement, a little bit about Financial Aid Application Completion Initiative, and some resources that we have for you all to help in your implementation of the graduation requirement. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dig into the content. Again, for those who've just joined, encourage you all to use the Q&A feature to ask any questions. I'm being joined by some of my colleagues, Nicole and Crystal, who are available as panelists to help answer any questions that you may have. So the first thing I want to talk about is the FAFSA completion policy. So Illinois, while we weren't the first state to implement a FAFSA completion policy, there are 12 states that have adopted a policy. And keep in mind, each state, because they're different, determines their own sort of criteria. Well, some it's a graduation requirement, some it's for financial aid requirements, for admissions, other things. So each state is different. So we have Illinois, Alabama, Texas, California, New Hampshire, Indiana, Nebraska, New Jersey, New York, Oklahoma, Connecticut, and Kansas are the states that have a policy. And keep in mind that when Illinois implemented their policy, it took effect in the 2020-21 school year. If you can all recall, it was in the middle of the pandemic. And because of the graduation requirement, this specific graduation requirement, I feel like was a really big reason why we were the only state during that time to have a positive increase in financial aid completion. And another thing to note, we always were a sort of top 10 state in terms of financial aid completion. We hovered around the 60% range. And now we hover in the 70% range. So now we're a top 5 state, top 2, top 3. And so we've done, we've come a tremendous way. But now it's, of course, thanks to all of your efforts in helping us get the word out to students. So I want to talk a little bit about the compliance. So what is this Illinois Financial Aid Application Graduation Requirement? So it's defined under Public Act 101-0180 and requires Illinois public high school seniors to complete a financial aid application or an opt-out form, a participation form, so you're going to hear that used interchangeably, to receive a diploma. Now, this is not saying if you have a student that is, like a foreign exchange student that is not receiving an Illinois diploma, but is just walking on stage or anything like that, that's not going to have any implication to those students, right? Specifically for receiving a high school diploma. Okay? You may have students who are graduating and receive something of that nature, but specifically calls for a high school diploma. So you have three different options to meet compliance in terms of for students. They can submit a 2627 FAFSA. They can submit, if they're a US citizen or eligible non-citizen, I do want to specify that. Or they can submit an alternative application for Illinois financial aid, and that's specifically for qualifying undocumented students. Or they can complete a 2526 ISB non-participation form, which we've called the opt-out form. Right? So they have any one of those three options to meet compliance. So we get this question a lot, right? Like, what is the purpose of this specific requirement? There are even some school districts in Illinois that already had that requirement in place before it became a requirement at the state level. So first thing that we want to point out too is completing a FAFSA is a very strong indicator that the student is intending to enroll in college. Now we know it's not the sole indicator, but we know that when a student completes a FAFSA, it is for the intent of enrolling in college, right? And again, that is a strong indicator, right? Now we know as well that the FAFSA itself doesn't go to college, the student goes to college. And we know there are other types of barriers that can exist that can derail a student, but completing a FAFSA is a very strong indicator, right? It also is intended to help students understand their post-secondary option. It's not intended to keep students from graduating. Right? And if you're a FAFSA designee in your school, or you're working through the FAFSA information, you're responsible for that FAFSA completion data in your school, and you're helping students navigate that process, our hope is to not keep them from graduating if they don't submit one of these applications. We'll talk about the admin waiver later on as an alternative for you to assist those students. But again, the purpose of this requirement is to really talk more about the post-secondary level and talk about the financial aid options that exist solely by just completing the FAFSA. Right? We're talking about the Pell Grant, the MAP Grant, just need-based aid that has no impact on their grades whatsoever, just based off financial need. So what does this mean for school? And so each school district, because of this legislation, you have to provide support or assistance, right, to help each student comply with the graduation requirement. And we encourage you all to lean on ISAC, right, our ISAC core. All of us that are on the panel, we're former core members, right, and have assisted students complete the FAFSA, right? While we no longer work directly with students, we constantly hire 40 to 50 additional core members to supplement the core that we have. Right now, we're over 70 strong core members that are available in your community that are no extra cost to you. Right? You just request them and they can go and help in meeting this requirement. Again, it's not intended to keep students from graduating. Right? And so there are these resources that you can utilize, and I'll have some more resources at the end of this presentation that we can talk this over. And if you're working with a student or parent and they're unable to submit the financial aid application or a waiver, the school principal can attest via a good faith effort, which we're calling the admin waiver, that was made, right, on behalf of the student. So that is as if the student completed the waiver themselves, you're just sort of completing it for them, right? Because you can reach out to them or you spoke to them about the program or about the FAFSA so many times and they just didn't submit. And of course, we know life happens. It can be difficult reaching students and families, getting the word out, having them follow through with what you're asking them to do. But that is there intended to keep students from graduating. So a little bit about the opt-out form. Where do you access it? You go to our website at studentportal.isac.org. If the student is under the age of 18, their parent needs to sign the application. So it's under our ISAC Student Portal website, under Program Applications and Status Checks, where you'll see all other programs that ISAC offers. So you're just not going to see this. You're going to see other applications. So it's important that when working with students that direct them to the proper channels there. Student will need to create an ISAC Student Portal website, Student Portal account. And once they create their account, they will log in and they can populate they populate their own information, self-report their information. And because they list your school, right? And if you're participating in gap access, it's going to populate in your school. For public high schools, there's nothing you really need to do. If you're already participating in gap access and if for school that you're unfamiliar with it or you don't know, or you for sure know that your school is not participating, have more information about how to sign up in our FAFSA completion initiative so that you can see that information, and that's where you would see it for high schools. It's only available to high schools. We'll talk more about it when we get into the gap access portion of it. But it's neat that when they complete it, they list their information. It's going to pop out on your end. So you will know, if I'm a student in your school, you'll know that I completed a waiver, right? And maybe it can help target the approach that you have working with students because you'll know, wait a minute, I know this student that will qualify for MAP and Pell, right? Or is interested in going to college. So let's talk to that student and say, why did they submit that waiver, right? Because sometimes really students don't know sort of what they're completing. They may have heard from someone or someone else that, oh, I'm completing this because I think this is going to help me qualify for financial aid, or they're not interested in going to college. And so if you want to have those conversations, that's something that you can have, and we'll have the ability to do so by knowing who completed, what. Again, we'll talk more about that. And so if you're requesting or if you're trying to use a paper version, and this is specifically by request only, and so if you're a school or school district, right, they're asking you to create your own waiver form, you have to request that from ISB, right? And if you go to FAFSA at isb.net, that's where you can request a paper copy of that form. I know in the past when the non-participation form or the opt-out form was initially released, we had a paper version for 2 years, and we've since moved online on our student portal website, and so we've not made the opt-out form publicly available. So ISB controls, they create that form. So if you need one for whatever reason, you can request one at FAFSA at isb.net. And again, students who are over the age of 18 can just complete the waiver themselves. So again, the non-participation form is not an end all be all. Just because I complete the opt-out form doesn't mean that I'm not eligible for financial aid. We certainly still encourage students to complete the FAFSA. And then we'll just override that data and uncheck that box, and then you'll see whether they have a calculated SAI or not based off that student. Right? We don't want this to be an added barrier to students and parents, but we know that anytime there's additional paperwork onto something, it can create a barrier, right? And so, again, this is where it's helpful to lean onto ISAC to help you sort of navigate through that process. We also don't want this to be the end of the conversation about post-secondary options. We also know there are going to be students that you are working with that have no interest in completing the FAFSA because maybe they're going directly into the military. Or maybe they're just going directly into the workforce. They have something lined up already and they're fine with that option. And that's totally okay. Right? Just having you work with that student to determine what is the best route for them to ensure that they are ensuring that they're graduating, right? Receiving that high school diploma, and ensuring that not completing a FAFSA or opt-out form is hindering them. So I want to go over some screenshots of the opt-out form so you can see really how quick and simple it is. So once you log in, you create your account, you'll see the FAFSA FAQ, which will highlight what are the current MAP and Pell Grant awards, and really talk about the financial aid process and how it can benefit the student to complete it, to see how much financial aid they're eligible for. That's really what the form is. Basically, it's indicating to the student that you understand what you're opting out from, right? And they still have the ability to go back in and complete a FAFSA, right? All they're opting out is saying, I know what the FAFSA is, but I'm just not going to complete it this year. That's it, right? They can always go back in and complete it later. They'll have the ability to do so. And so they enter their school name, whether they're a student or a parent. Again, if they're over the age of 18, they don't need a parent. But once you enter their date of birth, it's not going to populate. But if they're under the age of 18 based off their birthday, then their parent information, they'll have to add that. And they just provide their email address and the continued certification. Say sort of checkbox. So when we see all that information that they've self-reported, it might be hard to see as far as you can use the zoom in feature. But we've added this for some time now, but I want to highlight this because the opportunity to sign up for ISAC College Q&A. And what this is a feature that we utilize at ISAC, and we have real people reaching out to students through our text messaging platform that we partner with. But when they check that box, we have their contact information, and we can reach out to that student, maybe just to remind them that they can still complete a FAFSA, things like that. We don't telemarket students or sell any information. Of course, we take student data very serious, protecting that data very serious. And so they don't have to opt in, but if they do opt in, they will opt in to receive messaging from ISAC. And it's very targeted, specific to the opt-out form. And then they can always unsubscribe. If they say they're like, I don't want to get these messages, I'm going to unsubscribe. They can totally unsubscribe, and there's no cost to participating unless they have, something with their data plan, for example. But they enter their submitted name, they check that box, and they can sign in, and that's it. I want to highlight the FAFSA FAQ because it talks about sort of what is the FAFSA, highlights the difficulty of the application, sort of what is it, what happens about the money, student loans, all those things. So it talks all that information about students. I think it's really helpful to have students sort of review that information, so just they know what they're signing. And then once they get the confirmation, so they can download the form for their own records. They'll also receive a confirmation email, um, and they can also go back to the home screen. But this serves as sort of the confirmation that they've completed it. So the school will already have it as it'll populate in Gap Access, but in the event that something's not populating, students can still take a screenshot of this and keep it for their records and maybe email it to the school to show proof that they've completed it in case it's not showing up. So and this is particularly important, and we'll talk more about this in Gap Access when I get to the Gap Access screens, but students can manage their submission. So when they submit something, they can edit their data. So for example, I'm entering this information, I go by Manny, I'm entering all this information, everything else is correct, but I put Manny Talavera. But the school on the record has Manuel Talavera, right? So what can happen is the school will know, oh, I have a student that submitted a waiver at my school. Let me go see who it is. Oh, but it's not matched. Why is it not matched? Because there's a specific section. Again, I'll talk about it. And you'll say, oh, that's because Manny. Okay. And you can tell that student, okay, Manny, go back in, student portal, change Manny, put Manuel, right? So it can match correctly. And so they can manage that information. Or if they have any questions, they can call, the call center. There's a phone number right there and an email address right there too as well that they can reach out to. Okay. The next, I want to talk about the Financial Aid Application Completion Initiative. We know by the acronym FCI. So with FCI, it's a free service to district and schools. So it's only participating high schools only. So ISAC will have the ability to share financial aid completion data through Gap Access to track financial aid application completion at your school. So this is a tremendous tool. I think particularly when you're thinking about messaging students, you can have a very targeted approach when it comes to financial aid completion. You can also, otherwise reach those students that you may not otherwise know unless you survey them and get a feel for who's completed what and so forth. So for high schools who are not participating, your principals can sign you up through our automated system at Gap Access. So if you have more information, I have my colleague Haley Mickelson's information on here and our email address. So I'll leave this up here in case you want to, take this down. But she can help sign you up, and that way you can get to participating. Or if you're a school and you know you're participating, but you want to have access to that information, you can just reach out to your high school administrator, or you can reach out to ISAC School Services, and they can get you going and getting your sort of administrative account role set up. So we get this data and we use that data in Gap Access to match with financial aid application data that comes in that we get directly from the Department of Education, and also data that we track for alternative application completion data. So for public high schools, we get that data directly from ISB. So you may be wondering if you already know about your data. You may see some students that are no longer enrolled, or you may have a new student that's not on your roster. So when we get to Gap Access, you'll have the ability to edit that information. Again, we'll talk more about it when we get to that section. So we get that data from ISB. For private schools, you have to upload your own roster, right? And we recommend to not continuously upload a new roster each and every time. But if you have a student that transfers out, or you have a new student coming in that's transferred in, you can always add and delete that specific student. So public and private has that ability. However, only private schools have the ability to upload their own rosters. And if you're representing a school district and you have tons of students, you have questions about that, you can reach out to school services, right? And they can walk you through that process. So we match that data with FAFSAs and alternative applications every day, and that's reflected in Gap Access every day. Now, we also update our financial aid application completion of data on our website. We update every Monday. So what can happen is, and we'll see the website and I'll show you sort of what that looks like. You may see that data online that it's not updated, but your Gap Access will show that it's updated. So you just got to give it a week and it'll be updated. When it comes to utilizing the financial aid application completion initiative, so you'll have access to very key data that we think is going to help you track your students. Whether they've completed a FAFSA form or not, whether they completed a non-participation form or not. And you can then identify which students who've submitted a financial aid application, whether they have a student aid index and SAI generated or not. And that's important because then, again, you can target your messaging. Because now you know you have students who submitted their FAFSA. Okay, those students, I see they have a calculated SAI. I'm going to work with them to talk about financial aid packaging verification if that comes up. For my students who have a submitted FAFSA but no SAI, well, I want to figure out what happened. Was there a mistake on the application? Did they file as a provisionally independent student and they are going to get selected for verification? I want to help them navigate that process. So it really helps you sort of navigate working with students in financial aid completion. So getting into gap access. So what's new for this year, in part because of some new legislation that came down the pipeline. Some of you may have already attended the FAFSA designee training. And if you are a FAFSA designee at your school, we're going to have another training in December. So stay tuned for that email. Maybe you've already received it. But the first thing that I want to highlight in the sort of school summary page is the FAFSA designee. Okay. So the FAFSA designee and what schools are required is if they check this box, the update FAFSA designee, they will see they just need to put a contact name on there. Right. So if you're logging in and you're not seeing your FAFSA completion data, you'll enter your FAFSA designee and you'll be able to see that data. So you have contact name, phone number, email address. So once you enter that information, you can always edit that information too as well. And so that will list that individual as the FAFSA designee. So keeping the highlight, I don't want to get too in depth with who and what a FAFSA designee does, but think about them as a liaison between ISAC and the financial aid completion efforts at your school. That's all that is. Then we have the school support. So also with the 25-26 school year, Illinois high schools are required to indicate the type of financial aid support that they complete. And they'll have 5 different options to choose from. They have to indicate whether they've completed a FAFSA workshop, small group sessions, office hours, drop-in support, intentional outreach to students, or other type of student support. So if you bring in an ISAC core member and they do the FAFSA workshop, that is 100% fine, right? Just indicating so we can help kind of track this information. And this is as a result of Public Act 104-0013 or 0014 rather. And other things that you can see in the school summary page, you can see their graduation year where you can select the students data that you want to see, class size, how many students filed at FAFSA, how many have filed and have an SAI, how many have filed and have no SAI, how many are Pell eligible, how many are MAP eligible, what are the total opt-out forms. So think about this as a high level data, right? And how many total admin waivers have been submitted. So again, the admin waivers are submitted by the school administrator. So they're the only ones that can submit that. So it'll populate on there. So a student won't be submitting an admin waiver. But if they submitted an opt-out form, it'll populate on there. Whether it was paper or they did it online, the student portal website, it'll populate on there. And a couple things that I want to highlight in the student details summary. So if they go back and under graduation year, they click the graduation class of 2026, they will see some more data specific to that class. They'll see the opt-out form, so you can see how it's already grayed out because the school cannot select this on their behalf, right? Only the student can. And if it populates, it's going to check paper waiver completed as well, right? Now, if they checked in with the consent for follow-up with the opt-out form, it's going to populate on there. But again, the school cannot touch that information, check and uncheck that information. They can, however, check the paper waiver if they work with the student to complete one. And then later on, when it's enabled, they can check the admin waiver and complete the good faith effort on the student's behalf and complete that. They'll see the student's first name, last name, middle initial, date of birth, their FAFSA status, whether they filed or didn't file, and if they filed, whether they have an SAI or not, the initial date that the FAFSA was received by the Department of Education, specifically the Office of Federal Student Aid, and lastly, whether the student is MAP eligible. So the map eligible criteria is listed because if on their FAFSA form, if they list a map approved school, that's going to indicate as yes. You can have a student who maybe their third choice was UIC, right? It's not going to list on there as well. And ISAC, we use that data to help us sort of map and predict how many students are going to be using the map guide. Of course, we know that data can change because you can have a student who's like, yeah, I'm going to go to UIC, now all of a sudden they go out of state at Missouri, right? For example. And here on the bottom, they can add, delete students, right? You can save that data, save paper waiver changes. You can pull an Excel report. We'll talk more about that later on. I do want to highlight here, it's not reflective yet because we made this change on Friday. So if you were attempting to look up your data on Friday and were not able to, in part because that data was being updated, the not graduating tab, that's new for this year. And this is where you can indicate if a student is not graduating um, in your school. So that has been renamed to not receiving a high school diploma. So again, if you have a student who's not graduating, but they're still sort of considered high school seniors, that's something that that you can have on there, and it could be because of maybe they're participating in a special education program, or like I mentioned, they're not graduating, but they're still seniors. Maybe will graduate next year in December or again in spring. And so it allows you to kind of check that box. That way, you don't have to kind of work with them to complete a waiver form or anything like that. Those you know that they're not graduating. When it comes to admin waiver opt-out and admin waiver tracking, so again, a student completing an opt-out form on the student portal website, it's going to populate here automatically. The consent for follow-up will populate automatically if they consented to receive messaging from ISAC Q&A. Thing to highlight is that information has to match. So there's a section, we'll get into it, where there's a opt-out form and unmatched section. So you can see students, and I gave the example me earlier. If completing the opt-out form, I submitted Manny, but Bisbee has a record of Manuel, your school has a record of me being Manuel, and so there's going to be a mismatch. It's going to populate, and you're going to see that because I listed your school on there, right? So all that information has to match. So if you're seeing that, work with that student, just tell them, hey, correct that information. Or if you realize you have the incorrect information, well, then you can go in and change that, right? Because maybe you have me as Manny, and I put Manuel, and it's like, no, my name is Manuel. Okay, then you need to update your records to put Manuel, and then it'll match, right? Now, again, if you need a paper waiver, so that should only be completed if you requested and received a paper form from ISB, right? Again, at fafsa@isb.net, and then you can check that box to indicate that you have a paper version from that student. Now, for the good faith effort, so as I mentioned earlier, this feature is not going to be available until later in the spring, but this is sort of a snapshot of what it's going to look like. And so the good faith effort sort of indicates that as a school administrator, you attempted to reach out to the student and just couldn't just get hold of them, or they just were difficult to reach for whatever reason. All this is indicating that you attested that yes, you reached out to that student and they couldn't complete the form. So you enter the student's name if you have it. That's not required. And you just enter your name of who's completing the good faith effort for the admin waiver. And then it's going to populate in the school. And nothing else that the school will need to do for this. So this is the unmatched opt-out forms that I was talking about earlier. So if you go to the graduation year and the school summary page, you'll see students, college choices, SAI range. You'll see the unmatched opt-outs where you can click on and see all the students that appeared on there if they have opted out. And then when it comes to the class roster upload functionality, as I mentioned earlier, this is only available for private high schools. Public high schools, you'll need to update manually by adding and deleting one student at a time. But for private high schools, you'll need to follow the formats. You need to have Microsoft Excel 2003 or above and follow. We have templates where we'll walk you through the upload process if you haven't uploaded one before. Now, when you upload a roster, so we recommend uploading one initially sometime in the fall and just adding and deleting students, right, as they transfer in and transfer out. Because when you upload an entirely new roster, it's going to override all the history of the class. So you may have to go back in and make some changes to it. So it's important to just to then make that change, to just go in and add and delete a student, right? Do that at a time. Again, this feature is not available for public high schools, specifically just for private high schools in the state of Illinois. And then when it comes to downloading your report, I'm just going to go back to the school summary page so you can see sort of where to do that. In student detail summary column, you'll click Excel report, and you can download the full report, which will indicate which of your students completed an opt-out form, FAFSA, what is the status, SAI, no SAI, and have that information. So we recommend that when you keep that information, to keep it with the FAFSA graduating class and follow ISB's guidance in terms of compliance. So we'll have until the end of July, July 31st, right, to have that information and print that out and have it on the school file. So we recommend doing that so that you can have that and be in compliance and keep that for as long as you need to when it comes to keeping and reporting that data. So I definitely would follow your policies and procedures for that. And so again, this is a sort of example of that report. So when you click on Excel and you see that data, it'll indicate all this information just in an Excel format. So when it comes to the adding and deleting functionality, so this is where it's really important, because when you're working with your students and you're indicating and you're illustrating, okay, well, I have a student that's no longer in my school, we wouldn't want that to hurt your financial aid completion date, right? Because if you have 100 students and you have 5 students that are not there anymore, right, the highest FAFSA completion you get is a 95%, right? 5 points is 5 points. So there you can add students. You add their first name, last name, date of birth, middle initial. You can delete students. We recommend when you're deleting students, delete them one at a time, right? And then when you delete them, it's no longer going to appear on your roster. If you end up transferring back in, you can always go back in to add them. So, and these things are quite common, right? So you're working with students, you know you helped them complete a FAFSA, or you know they completed their FAFSA because they told you, sent a screenshot, but they're not showing up as completed, right? So we update gap access, sort of, we update it every day, right? But you're seeing something, it's not reflective on there. Partly it could be the timing of when they submitted the financial aid application, right? So we go by the FAFSA receive date. So if it's not received yet, just got to give it a little bit of time. What can happen too is you have a student who completes the wrong financial aid application. It's very common. You can have a student who submits a FAFSA completion. So right now we have the 26-27 application, and you can have students who submitted a 25-26 application. So I always tell students as a reminder, when you're applying for financial aid, you're requesting the aid for the academic year in which you're going to be enrolled in college. Now you can have a student who may submit both if they're graduating in December or they're graduating in the fall and they're going to go to college in the summertime. They will have to submit 2 FAFSAs, but for the most part, students are completing at the 26-27 FAFSA. So if you're seeing something, I know I helped that student complete a FAFSA form, and maybe they submitted a wrong FAFSA for the wrong year, I should say. So if student's name also is a strong indicator of the data not matching. So check to see the first and last name, how it's reported. Sometimes students switch it, or students may have multiple middle names or multiple last names and didn't indicate one, or you may not have one. So this is where it's important to kind of ensuring that all that information is accurate. Maybe the student entered a hyphenated name or a wrong date of birth, or the student didn't enter your high school, right? And so it's one of those things to always check that information. I also want to talk a little bit about the Recognition of Excellence Awards. So the Recognition of Excellence, we have actually started traveling. All the core members have started traveling and providing the high schools that received their award for last year. But the completion rates are based on the school's class roster that's provided in one of 2 ways. So for public high schools that are already participating in the FAFSA completion initiative, there's nothing you need to do. We get our rosters directly from ISB. And again, if you're seeing that data and you're noticing some students are no longer enrolled, you can delete them, right? Just delete them individually, right? So that way you're not accidentally deleting a student that's already there and then missing that data, right? We want you to do that because we want you, to have the most accurate enrollment data. Now for private high schools, you have to upload at least once between November now through July 31st of 2026. And then you'll be eligible for an award, right? Of course, we still want you to monitor that data and add and delete students as your roster changes if it does. But again, completion rates are based on your high school class roster, and we'll provide you with a nice banner with an award regarding your completion status, which are they are in 4 different levels. So a school can be designated one of these following recognitions. Platinum is 95% completion, gold is 85% completion, silver is 75% or greater, I should mention, completion, and bronze is 65% or greater completion. So you can track your data if you go to our main page for FAFSA completion, isac.org/home/FAFSA. If I'm on Google, I just Google ISAC FAFSA completion. And on the bottom of our main page, when we talk about FAFSA completion, we officially, for over a week now, have had our FAFSA completion data live, even when the federal government was in shutdown. So we had that data. And keep in mind that this data is what I'm referencing that gets updated every Monday, right? Now here you can go into, there's a hamburger menu next to financial aid completion. And from there, you can see additional data that you can compare different schools in your area. You can compare your information this year compared to last year. I think there's a lot of good that you can do in terms of really digging into FAFSA completion data. And I wanted to really talk about this. It's not something we share sort of externally, but I like to sort of highlight in terms of where we are in terms of FAFSA completion. Since this gets updated every Monday, I just didn't get the updated report, but soon this will get updated a little bit differently. But I want to sort of highlight where we're at right now. So the gray indicates the number of students who have not submitted anything, right? That's about 65%. So we have about 35% of students who have already submitted a FAFSA, already submitted an alternative application, or have already completed an opt-out form, right? Now, what I like to see here is of that 35%, 34.34, well, I'm rounding up here, so 34.5% have submitted a FAFSA or an alternative application, and 1% of students have submitted an opt-out form. So we know a significant amount of students are completing their FAFSAs, right? So we have over 140,000 students of eligible high school seniors, and we have close to 50,000 that have already submitted. So over a third, right? I think that's awesome, right? And so each year we get a couple percentage of students who each week we see the percentage points increase sort of substantially, 3, 5, 10%. So great. It's great to see that. But I wanted to highlight here in case anyone was wondering, well, I know where I'm at the school, but where am I at the state? I think it's important. Now, normally I'd recommend the NCAN FAFSA tracker. I'm not 100% sure at this time if it is live, but with the government shutdown, it isn't really live. But I imagine it's going to come up soon because I like to see as a state where we're at, right? Because I use that as a benchmark. And particularly when I used to work with my schools, like if the state is at 40%, right? But right now I'm at 45%, I know that, okay, I'm doing a great job. But if I'm at 35%, the state's at 40%, I know I got to find those students, right? And work with them. Okay. So that does it for the content of the presentation. Now I'm going to go over some resources to help you sort of with working with your students. But first, I do want to provide a sort of plugin for one-click college admit. So this is the state's version of direct admissions. And I want to highlight that because this is not supplanting any other direct admissions program, right? So you may know about other programs from other institutions that are participating in a direct admissions program, a 2+2 program, or one specific institution has, if you have this specific criteria, will automatically admit you, right? This is completely separate, right? So this is an initiative that ISAC is administering with the Illinois College Community Board and the Illinois Board of Higher Education in partnership. And what separates this from other direct admissions program is that it removes traditional barriers to applying to college. No essays, no application fees. Now, if you have a student that doesn't participate in one-click college admit, they can still apply to colleges the traditional way. They can still apply at the college for an application fee, right? Or they may participate going through Common App and completing a Common App application and not requiring an essay at different institutions, right? Those things are separate, right? But to participate in this specific program, the eligibility is going to be based on the student's address because they have to list an Illinois address and based off the student's high school GPA. Okay? So this year we're going to have two versions that are available, 1.0 version and the 2.0 version. After next year, or I should say after this year, there's only going to be one version available. And it's just going to be called One-Click College Admit, right? But we wanted to keep the 1.0 version going, or I should say, we wanted to keep how the program started last year, the pilot program, going at least for this year to benefit our current seniors so that we can have then our juniors participating, and then we'll have a continuous class of students who've been able to participate in One-Click College Admit in one way, shape, or form. So for the 1.0 version, it is just for college, for current seniors, let's say college current seniors. Again, after this academic year, it's no longer going to be available. And then the 2.0 versions for the class of 27, so our current juniors in high school. And after the 25-26 year, this is the only one that's going to be available, right? And it's an opt-in process, which I'll go ahead and talk about in the next coming slide. But the first thing I want to highlight is the 1.0 version. So again, this is just for high school seniors. They can opt in right now. And well, the opt-in process is really just creating a Common App account, listing an Illinois address, and entering their GPA, and you will automatically get matched with the Illinois public universities that are participating: Chicago State, Illinois, Eastern Illinois University, Governor State, Northern Illinois University, Northeastern Illinois University, SIU, SIUE, and Western Illinois University. So essentially, this is the same program that was launched last year as the pilot program. So we're still continuing this program this year. The criteria relies on the student's self-reported GPA. So I strongly encourage, if you're working with seniors and they are eligible for this program, to follow up with the schools that they've applied for. I like to think about the 1.0 one-click college admit version as like a conditional admission, right? Because they still need to verify their GPA with the school and still illustrate that they've graduated, verify their GPA, right? So they already have created a Common App account. I will highlight that you will have students who will receive Illinois offers. Those come in first, and then you will see other offers from Common App. And you can have students who receive multiple offers from there, right? And schools are able to customize their information, right? They're able to already start offering students aid in terms of like what they would be eligible for if they would like to enroll and accept admissions at that specific institution. But keep in mind, they are going through the Common App to communicate to the school. But I always tell the students when they apply or they go through the one-click version, the 1.0 version, to follow up with the school to complete their enrollment process. Okay. And then for the 2.0 version, so if it's expanded sort of the participating institution, so all public universities are participating in one way, shape, or form. This also impacts high school students as well as community college students. There is a component of that as well. It also includes all public community colleges. Okay. And it also uses verified GPA, which we will be collecting from the schools, which soon, later, by the end of next month, schools will be able to see other students which have opted in for one-click college admit. So that's going to be great. So when I talked about the institutions that are participating, so all the institutions are participating one way, shape, or form. You have UIC, and UIC, the participation rate is going to be a little different. They're going to be participating sort of in having an outreach campaign. So specifically, if students have been identified that their GPA and other credentials are matched to what they require, they're going to receive an invitation to apply to the school. Okay? So the process, again, is a little different. For all the other institutions, if the criteria meets, they're going to get a offer from that institution. And the offer will carry more weight because it's a verified GPA, not an unverified GPA. So again, 2.0 version uses a verified GPA, 1.0 version doesn't. So students opting in their junior year, and the hope is by this time, September, October, so by the fall, I should say early fall, because I'm still thinking in terms like it is still September, October. So by that time, the student will already receive offers, right? So you have a student specifically, I think about students like myself, first generation college student, didn't think of myself as college material, right? 16, 19 ACT score, very basic GPA 3.0. At that time, probably like a 2.7, 2.8. I was still working on getting it up, right? I can receive offers on there. So if I'm already thinking, I'm not college material because I'm seeing these schools and I see their college, their admissions criteria I'm not eligible for, but then I get an offer. Oh, wow, I got an offer from this school. And maybe some schools are offering me financial aid. Now, if the student wants to see what they're really eligible for financial aid, then they need to complete a FAFSA or an alternative application, right? Because one-click college admit is not a financial aid application. So the process is a bit different. So they'll go and create their Common App account, and they'll have that data. There's going to be a little bit more requirements for schools, but stay tuned for that. We'll have more information out in the spring in terms of what that information is going to look like. But at least starting December, you'll be able to see which of your students are participating, and we'll be launching a outreach campaign for community college students to participate because they're eligible for this as well. And if you like more resources, you go to One Click College Admit, our website, and /resources. You will be able to see resources for counselors, resources for students, some step-by-step guides, as well as webinar recordings, specifically talking about One Click College Admit. I'm using this as a plugin, but they have great information, and I think each and every day they're building this out more and more because it's the first year of the program, right? And so they're really building this out to be a great resource for students and families. Okay. Also want to highlight the Illinois CAN network. So the Illinois College Access Network. So it's spearheaded by ISAC. So it's a network of college access professionals with the goal of improving post-secondary access and success for low-income first-generation students. So you can join this community. There's no cost of joining. I highly encourage you because we bring in great speakers and have different discussions and presentations on how you can help us reach that goal. And we focus on four key objectives: increasing visibility of Illinois college access programs and services to students, disseminating college access research and best practices, providing professional development and technical assistance for college access providers, as well as being a facilitator in communication, connection with college access providers. Okay. Also, the highlight resource for your students, the First Generation Scholars Network. Every year we're seeing this grow more and more. We're excited about it. But essentially, this is a resource. If you're working with students or you have students who are person or family to go to college, we can connect them with a ISAC core member that was also a first generation student and connect with different materials, different resources, different institutions that have programs specifically for those students. And as I mentioned about the ISAC core, they're available to help all year round, not just during financial aid season. Two things I want to highlight here is they're available to help your students in navigating post-secondary planning, whether it's going to college, going to the military, or joining the workforce, right? Like searching for scholarships, applying to colleges, completing a financial aid application. They're there to help the student with anything post-secondary planning. Now, you can enter your zip code for finding your core member. If you go to studentportal.isac.org, you'll see the tab of our resources, and you can see the ISAC core tab, and you can see which are your local core members. You can also meet with them virtually using our bookings page. And you can also, if you're requesting a core member at your school, you can go to ISAC events tab, and it will take you directly to the outreach request form where you can request an ISAC core member to be at your school, which I think is going to be a great help. But again, they're available year round. And lastly, we're here to help. I want to highlight our ISAC Connection Q&A. So if you have any resources, right, or you have any questions, and you'd like to, learn more different resources that we have available for you, you can text us at 847-250-2384, and we can share more information with you. We have real people that'll text you and follow up with you. Again, we're not spamming, we're trying to sell anything. It's really just to be there as a resource for you all. So if you prefer texting, whether email, this is a great resource for you to use, an alternative. We also, as I mentioned, are offering continuing education and professional development hours. So my colleague is going to open the chat and share that link with you all. That way you can have that link and complete that survey and get your PD hours. Now I know that the date some of you may be out. I wouldn't worry about that date. So as long as you can get them in by early next week, and we'll process your Cs and PDs. We know it's the holidays, but if you can get it in prior to that, great, right? We'll get it in and get those back to you as soon as you can. So thank you all. That's all the information that I have for you right now. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us at isac.outreachtraining@illinois.gov, and you can also sign up for ISAC's e-messaging service. And I would highly encourage you all to do so, because we'll send you information about different professional developments. We're working on our spring calendar. We'll have that up shortly, and also other information, map suspense dates, things like that. So that's at isac.org/e-messaging. For those who need CEs and PDs, stay tuned. I'm not seeing the link on there, but we'll get that shared out to you so you guys can see that. Otherwise, we'll stay on for a couple more minutes if you have any questions, or if you asked a question and they haven't been answered yet. But we'll get that out. So just stay tuned for that. And thank you all for joining, and hope you all have a great Thanksgiving. Thank you.